Hey guys, welcome back. Last week we covered the basic configuration of the Pi itself, things like the display configuration and how to patch and update the Pi.
This week we're going to talk about remoting your Raspberry Pi. Last week we talked about that when we were talking about SSH and VNC. Now this week we're actually going to show you how to do that, and we'll get to that in just a moment. So Tim, we talked about getting ready to start remoting that Raspberry Pi, but I think there's some concepts that we need to understand first. Like for instance, what the heck is this SSH business?
Okay, so SSH stands for Secure Shell, and it's basically a way to communicate with another machine over a network.
Oh, so why is it useful?
Well, imagine the scenario where your Pi is in the other room and you want to turn a light on or off or something like that. You don't want to have to go walk over to the Pi to do it. With SSH, you can remote into the Pi and fire off commands.
So like, let's say you set up your Pi to run a security camera or something like that. Instead of going and pulling it out of the security camera and connecting it up to a mouse and keyboard, you can just kind of remote into it then, right?
Yep.
Wow, that's cool. So what kind of tools would you use to SSH into the Pi?
Well, a lot of people think that SSH is some kind of like super secret hacking or something like that, but it really isn't. Basically, there are a variety of software tools. All you need is an application to communicate over SSH to a host that's serving SSH traffic. So, for example, there are tools for Windows, there are tools for Macintoshes, there are tools for Linux hosts, as well as all the other types of devices out there like Android phones, tablets, iOS, or iPad, things like that as well.
So do we have to remote like from a Windows machine to a Windows machine, or from a Linux machine to a Linux machine, or can you cross-platform this thing?
Typically you can cross-platform provided that you've installed the right software and set the right settings.
Wow, that's kind of powerful, right? Because I can go from a Windows machine to my Raspberry Pi. I can have a Mac go to my Raspberry Pi. I can go from pretty much any machine to my Raspberry Pi. It doesn't matter what operating system, as long as it has the ability to do SSH.
Yep.
That is awesome. So the questions I have for you guys is, have y'all done SSH before? Have you remoted into a computer before? Have you remoted into a Raspberry Pi before? Let us know in the comments below. Yeah. And we're going to go get set up on the computer so we can show you how to get the IP address and download all the tools that we need to remote into our Raspberry Pi. And we'll get to that in just a moment. So we're sitting here back at the computer, and I guess, Tim, what is the first thing we need to do in order to remote the Raspberry Pi?
Well, first we've got to know how to be able to reach it. And the simplest way usually is to get the IP address of the Pi itself.
Oh, okay. So what's the IP address?
Well, let's go find it.
Okay. How do I go there?
First off, we're going to need to open a terminal.
Okay, gotcha. So there's two ways to open a terminal, right?
Yep.
So there, if you got our version of Noobs, which I don't know if it's on every single version, it's up here at the top. Mm-hmm. But if it's not there, don't worry. We can also go to hit the Pi, go down to Accessories, and then open up Terminal. Basically, the one at the top is basically a shortcut to the terminal. They're both
shortcuts to the same terminal.
Yeah, so let's make this a little bigger so everybody can see.
Great.
So notice we're sitting at the Pi at Tech Bucket List Pi. That's actually the Pi at the name of our Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, the host name, which we set in the last session.
So now, how do we get the IP address?
The command we're going to run is ifconfig, and it's all one word, no spaces.
Okay, so ifconfig, very similar to the Windows IP config.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so we're going to press enter on that. Holy moly, there's a lot of data here.
Yes. But don't be intimidated.
I am.
It's pretty straightforward.
I'm intimidated.
It's broken down into groupings of interfaces, and that's really what ifconfig stands for, interface configuration, right? And you'll have one or two addresses that you need to pay attention to. Either the ETH0 is the wired interface, so if you physically wired your Pi into your network.
Like a Cat5 cable or something like that, or a Cat6 or what have you. Okay.
Or WLAN 0 for wireless LAN configuration.
Oh, okay, so that's the one without the wire.
And then those groupings are further broken up from there.
Okay.
So you'd get your address from one of those two.
Okay, so which one? I mean, there's still, even if I look at ETH0, which is the wired version, which is what we are right now, I think.
Yes.
Which one of these numbers and letters?
Yeah, there's still quite a few numbers and letters there, right? So the first line is the interface itself. The second line is the IPv4 address, or sometimes called INET. So you'll see an INET, and then behind that INET is a set of numbers, 4 numbers separated by dots.
Oh, so this 192 number here is my IP address?
Yeah, they call that dotted decimal notation.
Okay, so all this other stuff, I think we might cover that in a later video to explain what that really is. But the important thing is getting this number right here.
That's correct.
The 192.168.88.17.
Let me go ahead and write that down. Sometimes the analog world can be helpful.
And, we're getting old. Our memories
exactly
are pretty bad.
So what was that again? 192?
192, 168,
okay,
88,
okay,
17. And dots,
Okay, got it.
Okay. So that's how you get the IP address of the Raspberry Pi. Next, we're going to go ahead and switch over to the Windows computer, and we're going to actually download the software that we need, and we'll cover that is Putty and also the VNC software, so that we can actually remote into this Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
We'll get to that in just a moment. So Tim, we got the Windows computer up here now, and what software do we need to download to remote into the Raspberry Pi?
So the first thing we're going to want to get is going to be the ability to SSH, and pretty much the whole community agrees that I've ever read that the best tool for that job is from a guy named Simon Tatham. It's called Putty, and the best way to do that is to use Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo to find Putty.
Yeah, whatever search engine you're comfortable
with. Choose your search engine.
So I'm going to search for Putty here. Let me get the keyboard in front of me so I'm not leaning sideways. That'd be kind of weird.
Yep.
All right, so Putty. Wow, Putty comes up with a lot of options.
And you should see a link to a UK website that has the SG Tatham in the name. It's usually the second or third link on that Google link.
Oh, okay. So click on the link.
Yep. And you'll see a page that looks just like that, and that's how you know you're really getting Putty and not some knockoff or third-party product. And at the top, you'll see a version that's not even up to version 1.0. It'll be point something, and that will be downloaded here. It's usually right at the very top of the page.
Oh, sweet.
And then you'll see a page that has some green boxes on it showing you different packaged files and binaries and things like that. We want the packaged files because we like things easy.
Oh yeah, I don't like to have to extract binaries and put them somewhere.
Let's do it the easy
way. So I've got a 64-bit computer. So should I do the 64-bit version? Typically,
I'd prefer to do that if that's the case and you've got the opportunity. But both of them will work on most machines.
Let's see how fast we can download.
All right, it's coming in a decent clip.
Awesome. So, like I always say, grab your file.
Keep them neat.
Put it into a safe place.
Yep.
So I'm going to go put it over here into my little spot. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and start the installer.
Sure.
Okay. So I just double click that installer, come up to a screen.
Pretty standard wizards. You just next your way through it. Should be okay. But if you've got to put some files in a different location or something like that, follow the on-screen prompts.
Add it to your desktop.
If you want. You can.
If not, don't. Okay.
Now, this installation does require administrative access. So if you don't have administrative access to the computer in question, you need to ask whoever does to get you temporary access to be able to install it.
I'm going to uncheck to view the README file.
Okay.
I don't ever read them.
All right.
All right. Sweet. So we got Putty installed.
All right.
So I'm going to see if I can't find that putty installation somewhere. Okay.
There it is.
There it is. And I'm going to open it up. Holy moly, that looks cool.
Okay, so it's going to have a lot of options. Again, don't be intimidated. We've got our IP address that we wrote down from earlier on our trusty analog piece of paper. And at the top, it'll show host name or IP address conveniently. And that's where we're going to want to put in the IP address of our Pi.
Okay.
So that's 192.168.88.17 separated by periods.
Okay. So somebody else might say 192.168.88.17. It's the same thing. It's the period.
We've just worked together long enough to be able to know when to rattle off an IP with each other.
Right.
Now the port is going to be by default 22 for a Pi, but for other kind of connections, it could be a different port. And later on, you can learn about the Pi to change that value and stuff like that. But for our purposes, we're going to stick with the default. And then for convenience, we generally want to save that session.
Oh, yeah.
Down at the bottom, down below those choices. And we want to give it a name that will make sense or a really cool name like what we typed in there.
Yeah, because we're not biased or anything.
And then save. And then open down at the bottom on the right.
Open.
Then it will ask you a question potentially about warning, you don't have a key saved or something like that. You don't have to worry about it. You can say yes to that question because it's the first time you've ever connected.
Yeah, we've already actually logged into our Pi, did a dry run to make sure that everything was good so that we didn't have a bad video for our viewers.
Exactly.
So that's why that didn't show up.
Yeah.
So now we're actually at the login prompt. In our previous video, we talked about there is a username and password for the Raspberry Pi. Mm-hmm. Even though it automatically boots up, it's still using a username and password. So for us, the username is Pi. Yep. I'm going to press enter. Now, notice it says Pi at and the IP address of the Raspberry Pi. Now, I changed my password, and hopefully you did too, because everybody knows what the default password is for a Raspberry Pi. Yes. So please change your password if you have not.
It's a good practice.
I'm going to go ahead and type in my password and press enter.
And we're there.
So how do you know that we're actually in the Raspberry Pi? Number one, we got some green text over there to the left, and it says Pi at Tech Bucket List Pi. If you remember in our previous video, that's what we named our Pi.
But how else could we verify that?
I don't know, Tim. How can we do that?
Oh, there's one easy way we can confirm the IP address, even though that's the IP we connected to, just to make sure that we're not getting some kind of weird trick or something like that. So we'd run ifconfig like we did before.
Yep, not to be confused with ipconfig.
Yes.
ifconfig.
Yes.
Yep.
And there's our IP address and all that sort of thing.
So
between the two, we're reasonably certain that we're on the Pi. If you really want to be geeky, you can look at other information, like, for example, the MAC address that's listed there. That's listed in the same block as ETH0 or WLAN 0. But that's only if, you've got multiple Raspberry Pis you're connecting to or something like that, and you can't temporarily confuse which one you're in. If you've only got the one, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to be connecting to that one the way that we just described.
So we just connected via SSH to the Raspberry Pi.
Yep.
That's awesome. So, but what happens if I want to actually get on there and look at programs and things like that on my Pi? How can I do that?
Hackers don't need that. No, I'm just kidding. There's another way called VNC.
VNC. RealVNC.
Yes.
Yep. And we're actually going to go look at that right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control D out of my Raspberry Pi.
To gracefully disconnect your session.
Why is that important, Tim?
The key thing that you're going to take away from that is if you don't disconnect gracefully, the changes that you might have done while you were connected might not be saved or reflected. The biggest one's the history. As you type commands into a shell session, your commands are saved as a history, and we'll cover that in a later video. But if you disconnect in a dirty or ugly way, you're going to potentially lose that information.
Okay, so RealVNC, same way we did Putty?
Yeah, I think you should use the Google search engine, or you can use any other search engine of your choice. We don't favor any particular search engine here.
Oh, yep. And this is the very first thing. We did RealVNC Viewer.
Yep.
And it's the very first thing. It's off-colored because we've already been there. Again, we wanted to make sure that things were working properly before we shot the video. So that's why it shows like we've been there before. So I'm going to go ahead and click the Download VNC Viewer.
And looky there, right on the front page, they mention a Raspberry Pi by name with their logo and everything.
Well, that's awesome.
Isn't it?
It's right there, guys, in case you don't know.
And so we're going to want to download that.
Hit that download, huh?
Yep. And again, that'll come in pretty quick. It's relatively small.
Smoking.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to go show it in the folder. I'm going to go grab that VNC viewer and put it in my safe spot.
Again, got to keep everything straight.
There is a reason why I keep saying that, folks. Don't hate your future. Don't let your future self hate your past self.
Yes.
It's just not a good thing.
Yes.
Save those software applications.
Okay.
So VNC. So I'm going to
So we
launch
got to
it.
download it. Let's go ahead and run it.
Okay.
And again, you're going to get a wizard with, a series of choices. If you care about those choices, you can pay attention to them. If you care about this license agreement, for example, you can page it and look at every single line of it. We know that this particular agreement is okay for our purposes, so we're okay with saying I accept.
Desktop shortcut if you choose to do so.
Purely optional, but yeah.
I like to keep my desktop clean, so I don't ever do that.
Yeah, and this thing only uses 12 meg of storage on the whole computer, so shouldn't have to worry about storage.
Okay, and so we're done. We don't have any README file here, so we're going to go ahead and click Finish, and I'm going to close this window out.
Okay.
I'm going to close this. I'm going to minimize this window.
Okay.
And I'm going to go down here and search for my RealVNC Viewer, or VNC. There it is. So there's my VNC Viewer. Double click it. All right.
Okay, so this is a similar window to the Putty session, only a little bit less options because they're trying to be a little bit friendlier. But at the top, that's where you're going to put in what you're going to connect to. And in our case, we know, fortunately for us, we've documented what our IP address is. So we're going to try to connect straight to that IP address.
Okay, and what's that IP address, Tim?
192.168.88.17.
Okay, and just press enter.
Yep. And then it's going to come back and say, okay, I need to be authenticated. I don't know who you are. Mm-hmm. And you would approve who you are the way we set it up prior. So we're going to use the username of the Pi, which in this case is Pi, and the password that you changed your Raspberry Pi to because you're a responsible viewer.
Okay. Now you can select remember password if you want. That's completely up to you. But if you go change your Raspberry Pi's password later and you don't change this, you might get some connectivity issues. You may not be able to connect because you get an access denied or something like that.
Yeah, but again, we're kind of favor simplicity. So, and there you go. You're connected,
and we have just connected to the Raspberry Pi using RealVNC. We can go in here. We can click on anything we want. It's the same thing as what you've seen in our previous videos.
Yep.
We can even open up Terminal.
Now, there are some significant differences between this and local access to the Pi, right?
Yes.
The biggest one's going to be what a lot of people in the industry call latency. And what that means basically is from the time that you take an action to when the action is represented on the screen or it changes, there's a delay. There's a period of time between those two. And that latency, for some people, they find it very difficult to use because of that. You just have to have a little bit of patience with it and understand that if you don't, account for that latency, it can be kind of difficult to use. So certain uses with VNC are not good, like video, for example. It's very unpleasant.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't want to do that. This is if you're having a remote into the Pi, you're going to be doing very basic things.
Yes, that don't require fast screen refreshes and that sort of thing. But this is still excellent to be able to get to everything within the Pi without having to be in front of it. So if the Pi's in the other room, in another house, in another continent, you can still reach out to it, control it, and use it.
So in our future videos, we're actually going to be remoting into the Pi for most of the things that we're going to do, unless we need to actually access some of that core CPU and video, whatever,
play a video or something like that.
So otherwise, we'll probably most likely be remoting in for the most part. Yeah. So have you guys had any problems remoting into your Raspberry Pi? Either through Putty or SSH. Yeah. If you did, please let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, down below.
We'll be happy to answer any questions and try to get you helped out.
And always, you could subscribe while you're there.
Please subscribe.
Hit that bell, please.
Hit the bell for get notifications on future videos, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thanks for coming.